Chutes has one other massive thing going for it, which is underreported and, well, not well understood. And that alone could be the sole reason why Chutes goes on to be a success. There's also some areas where Chutes is beginning to fall behind their centralized competitors. And not only does it not have the context of the chat from other models, sometimes it doesn't even have the context of chats from its own model. Bittensor has over 100 subnets, but today I want to start with one of the most interesting ones, Chutes Subnet 64. Chutes is trying to manage a very real problem in AI. How do developers access scalable inference without having to manage GPUs, servers, infrastructure, and cloud complexity? And unlike a lot of crypto projects, Chutes appears to have a real product, real users, pricing, API docs, and revenue claims. But there's one big question. Is Chutes a genuine infrastructure business being bootstrapped by Bittensor, or is it a subsidized compute network that only works because TAO emissions are covering the gap? That's what I want to unpack in this video. This is the first video I want to make in a recurring series. And the goal is simple. I want to go subnet by subnet and ask, are these Bittensor subnets generating real world revenue? Not emissions, not token speculation, not just narrative, actual revenue from people using the product. And Chutes is a great place to start because the product is relatively easy to understand. It's basically trying to be a decentralized AI inference platform. So what is Chutes? Chutes is a serviceless AI compute platform focused on open source models. The basic idea is that developers can deploy, scale, and run AI models without having to manage the underlying infrastructure themselves. On the front end, it looks like a developer platform. APIs, SDKs, model access, pricing, documentation, and dashboards. On the back end, it connects into Bittensor. Miners provide the compute, and the network coordinates incentives. So instead of a developer saying, I need to rent GPUs, configure servers, deploy models, manage uptime, scale demand, Chutes is saying, just use our platform and call your models through an API. The reason why this is interesting is because AI inference is a very real market. Inference is what happens when somebody actually uses an AI model. That usage costs money because somebody has to provide the compute. So if Chutes can provide reliable, cheap, scalable inference for open source models, then the potential market is real. This is not some abstract Web3 use case where you have to squint to understand the demand. Developers already pay for AI inference every single day. The question is whether Chutes can capture that demand in a sustainable way. The first thing I look for in a subnet is whether or not there is a real product. With Chutes, the answer appears to be yes. There is a public website, there are docs, there is API documentation, there is pricing, there are model categories, there are miner resources, and there is a user-facing platform where developers can interact with AI models and infrastructure. That does not automatically prove that the business economics work, but it does mean that this is not just a token narrative or white paper. So how does Chutes make money? The simple version of the business model is this. Developers and users pay to run AI workloads. Chutes provides the platform, miners provide the compute, Bittensor incentives help coordinate the supply side. Chutes has a subscription pricing, pay-as-you-go pricing, and API infrastructure. It also has pricing API documentation that refers to daily revenue summaries, including pay-as-you-go users, invoice users, subscriptions, and private instances. That is important because it suggests that the platform is not just designed around usage. It is also designed around measuring revenue from different customer types. Now, the most interesting source I found is a Chutes post from March 2026 called From Volume to Value, Building a Sustainable AI Inference Platform. And this post is important because Chutes openly says that its token volume dropped by 45% over 6 weeks. Normally that sounds bad, but Chutes frames this as intentional. They say that they removed unprofitable or low quality usage and started prioritizing healthier revenue. They mention removing around 10 billion tokens per day from a free quota offered to around 11,000 users. And they mention removing around 10 billion tokens per day from a privately hosted model that was running at a 9-to-1 cost revenue ratio. 9-to-1 cost revenue ratio. That is actually one of the more bullish signs to me, because a lot of crypto projects try to maximize vanity metrics. They try to show the biggest numbers possible. But Chutes is saying, We cut usage that was not economically healthy. That sounds more like a business trying to improve unit economics than a project just trying to pump the numbers. In that same post, Chutes says that revenue per million tokens increased by 37.7% since February the 1st. They also say that revenue per GPU improved from $4.05 to $5.89. And they say that organic pay-as-you-go revenue from hosted public LLM inference grew 20% over the final 10 days of the measured period. Now, we should be careful here. These are Chutes' own numbers. They are not an independent audit, but they are still useful because they show what the team is focused on. They are not just saying, look how many tokens we have processed. They are saying, look how much better the revenue quality is becoming. That is exactly the kind of thing that you want to see if you're looking for real-world revenue. There was another important update in February 2026. Chutes announced changes to its early access and subscription model. The 200 daily request quota was being retired. TEE model access was removed for early access users. And high usage customers were pushed towards a pay-as-you-go pricing. That matters because free quotas and unlimited style subscriptions can attract massive usage, but not necessarily profitable usage. So again, the direction of travel appears to be less free or subscribed volume, more paid usage, more pay-as-you-go, more focus on sustainable economics. That is exactly the transition you want to see if Chutes is about real-world revenue. Now, let's look at the market side. Chutes has its own subnet token, Subnet 64. CoinGecko lists Chutes as a Bittensor ecosystem token. And at the time I checked, Subnet 64 had a market cap of around the high tens of millions to the low hundreds of millions. So the market is clearly assigning meaningful value to the subnet. But that creates the next question. If the token is valued around that level, how much actual external revenue is there underneath? And that is where the story gets more complicated. The bear case is that Chutes may have real users, real revenue, but the economics may still be heavily dependent on TAO emissions. That would imply a very large gap between customer revenue and protocol subsidy. Other sources have repeated similar concerns, arguing that the low-cost inference users enjoy may partly be subsidized by TAO emissions, rather than being purely the result of structural, cheaper, decentralized compute. The problem is that Chutes revenue is not fully transparent on-chain in the same way DeFi protocol revenue might be. A lot of AI API usage happens off-chain. So unless Chutes publishes audited numbers or a public revenue dashboard with clear methodology, we have to treat the exact ARR figure as uncertain. My view is that the safest way to frame it is this. Chutes appears to have real paid usage, but the exact level of external revenue is hard to verify independently. And this is the most important part. Protocol emissions are not automatically bad. In fact, incentives are the whole point of Bittensor, but they are meant to bootstrap supply, attract miners, reward useful work, and create decentralized markets. The issue is not that Chutes receives emissions. The issue is whether external demand can grow large enough over time to make those emissions less important. So here is the bull case for Chutes. Number one, it has real product and a real market. Number two, AI inference demand is not theoretical. Number three, Chutes has a public platform docs pricing APIs and miner infrastructure. Number four, the team is openly talking about revenue quality, not just usage. Number five, they have made changes to remove free or unprofitable usage and push high volume users towards pay-as-you-go. And number six, if decentralized inference becomes a major category, Chutes is one of the most obvious Bittensor subnets positioned to benefit. Chutes has one other massive thing going for it, which is underreported and, well, not well understood. And that is it achieves its inference at zero capital spend. Unlike the centralized guys that are pouring trillions and trillions into data centers, all of which sits on their balance sheet, all of which is a business risk for them, Chutes has zero capital spend. Nil, nada, nothing. They don't have any capex sitting on their balance sheet. And that is a huge advantage. It significantly lowers operational risk and it makes them more agile. Chutes is basically operating a model where all the capital expenditure risks are borne by the miners and none of that risk comes back onto Chutes. And that alone could be the sole reason why Chutes goes on to be a success. I go into more detail on why that is such a big advantage in this video here, where I compare it to OpenAI. That is a pretty strong bull case. But here is the bear case. Number one, exact external revenue is hard to independently verify. Number two, some of the bullish ARR claims are not audited. Number three, AI API usage is largely off-chain, so the revenue picture is less transparent than many crypto investors might assume. Number four, independent analysis suggests emissions may be far larger than external customer revenue. And number five, if TAO emissions fall or the market stops subsidizing cheap inference, Chutes may have to prove that customers are willing to pay sustainable prices. So the bear case is not that Chutes is fake, the bear case is that Chutes may be real, but it's still very dependent on Bittensor incentives. There's also some areas where Chutes is beginning to fall behind their centralized competitors. One of those areas is about user experience. If I go into OpenAI and I have a chat, it has the context of all my other chats. Having the context of other chats is really helpful because I don't need to keep on repeating myself. It can also help in the context of projects where you've got a number of chats around a similar sort of topic, and it can learn from the discussions we've had what sort of output I might be looking for. Also, when it's solving problems for me, it can switch between models quite seamlessly under the hood without me having to direct it. Currently that doesn't happen with Chutes. You have to manually change models, and not only does it not have the context of the chat from other models, sometimes it doesn't even have the context of chats from its own model. This is a problem that the Chutes team is well aware of, and they are working on it. And I know that because the whole reason why I know about this problem is because I've heard them discuss it in calls and interviews. Eventually, AI agents that work across different platforms will come away and take away this problem because they'll just automatically select the best models and remember your chat history. But until then, the Chutes team does need to work on a solution in the interim to make sure they don't fall too far behind. So what is my verdict? I would put Chutes in the category of real product, real usage, profitable real revenue, but not yet proven sustainable economics. This is one of the more credible Bittensor subnets I've looked at because it has a product people can actually understand. It sells AI inference, it has APIs, it has pricing, it has developer tools, it has public updates discussing revenue quality. That is much more than many crypto projects ever achieve, but I would not yet say that the business model is fully proven. The key thing I want to track from here is whether or not Chutes can grow external revenue fast enough that the story becomes less about TAO emissions and more about actual demand. Because if Chutes can do that, then it becomes one of the strongest examples of Bittensor working. But if it cannot, then Chutes may become the clearest example of the subsidy problem inside the subnet economy. Overall, I would say that Chutes is one of Bittensor's strongest real revenue candidates, but the sustainability question is still open. In the next videos, I'll be looking at more Bittensor subnets and asking the same question. Is this a real business, or is this still mainly an emission-driven experiment? Let me know which subnet you want me to research next, and as always, this is not financial advice. The goal here is not to shill any subnet. It is to separate product evidence, revenue evidence, emissions, and market narrative. Alright, that's it for this one. If you got some value out of this video, please do subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.